1. A long time ago, in a hotel far, far away, I angered the hospitality gods, and they sought retribution in the form of the world's greatest detective. From here on out, known as Detective Idiot, or DI for short. DI was like any other guest before the gods decided we should share a special moment in hospitality-guest relations. I did not check him in, and he was just a name and a room number until he needed something, because of course he did. It started off simple enough. DI called down to report his lights above his bed didn't work. I had the misfortune of being maintenance whenever maintenance left for the day, and so up I went. The lights above his bed have their own switch on the side unit for convenience sake, and indeed this switch did nothing. After DI and myself both nodded in agreement this was the case, I went to check the breaker to tick all the boxes before asking if DI would like to move rooms. As the breaker box was all fully on, and we didn't have replacement bulbs for those specific lights at the time, DI did indeed want to move. I called down to my coworker and had them prepare the keys as DI prepared his things. I handed DI the keys and directed him to his new room down the hall. All was well. It wasn't. In the time it took me to ride the elevator back down and resume my position at the desk, DI had already called down to report. We were 0 for 2 on working bed lights. No fucking way, I replied, to my lovely coworker who was now laughing as I shook my head and turned around to head back up. Keep in mind, the entirety of both rooms were fully functional as intended, besides these little reading lights attached to the bed. After I've returned to the room, DI has a newfound annoyance in his greeting. You know, I just don't get it. How do the rest of the lights work and these ones don't? This time around, I did what I should have done the first time. Remembered I know this property better than the guest. After flipping on every light switch, huzzah, the bed lights come on. I chuckled quietly and explained to the guest the rooms have a master switch that allows you to turn specific lights off, but others are turned on and off manually, or are attached to other switches. Surely DI would see it as just a little funny mishap, and the lights now work. We could both go our separate ways. Turns out, I had just offended his entire bloodline and every moral he ever held dear in his life by flipping that switch. Much like an encaged primate who has just discovered a new toy fell upon their enclosure, DI looked upon this supposed master switch with great intrigue. After flipping it on and off a few times to see what would happen, he decided that he was not wrong, but in fact, whoever designed such a contraption, and all the employees who were complicit in duping him from basking in the glorious warmth that is the headboard's reading lights, were wrong. You see, the master switch had to be flipped down to be on, and then up to be off. Whenever it was flipped up, a small light would come on to presumably be able to see in the dark. DI had deduced that this makes no sense, and the engineers who designed this were out to spite him no matter how many years ago these switches had been installed. While he proceeded to give me a lecture on light switch design, and I was inclined to agree this design was silly, I couldn't help but begin to scream in my head, yes, but do the lights work or not? During my inner monologue, he says something that I don't know how to take. You see, I'm not an idiot. The light switch is flipped upside down. It is only in retrospect that he did not find any humor in the situation, and probably did not appreciate my failed attempt to receive what I thought to be a joke. I hid my smirk quickly and proceeded to indulge him on the rest of his tirade. No, sir, I do apologize if the switch was confusing, and I see your point. It is odd that it was designed that way. Translation, asshole, the lights work. I get it, you don't appreciate how easy a fix it was. Enjoy your lights and let me leave. He then proceeded to inform me of his problems with the particular brand while allowing me to bask in all the glory of his status. And you can put me down for no housekeeping. All housekeeping at this place are scum. I can't speak to all of them, but I'm once again inclined to agree with him to a degree. Housekeeping fucks everyone over at least once. It's a shit job for shit pay. What you gonna do? It's at this point I finally calm DI down enough to make my escape, and hurry to the front desk so I can politely inform my coworker that DI's issues have been adequately resolved. Read shit on him for wasting my time. If you think that's the end of this saga, you haven't worked in hospitality enough. 2. So I work for a notable hotel chain. Our property has 225 rooms, a bar, restaurant, and IRD. Now, just like every other hotel in this dimension, we charge a security and incidentals fee. The fee is 25% of the room and tax for the whole stay. So I'm working the front desk one night, and this lady comes sauntering in. And she just has the look. The look that says, I'm going to ruin your life. So she comes up to me, and she was actually nice to me at first, asking me how my day was, smiling, just being generally pleasant. Now our chain, like most, has an honors program, and this guest was in our second highest tier. We'll call her the precious metal member. So now we arrive to the point in the check-in process where I need to get her card info, and I'm explaining the deposit to her. She just nods, the total pops up, and she raises an eyebrow. That's when I knew she was about to make the remainder of our time together absolute hell. Why is that number so high? What is my rate? I give her the rate. So we're authorizing the room tax and security deposit, which is 25% of the room and tax. Okay. So she confirms the rate and her card declined. A look of pure fury passed over her face, and I was not mentally prepared for this. Why did my card decline? I'm not sure, ma'am. My computer doesn't tell me why a card declines, it just tells me that it declines. Well, I can do the room and the tax on one card and the deposit on another. Now, technically, according to my specific properties policy, I'm not allowed to do that. However, I just want to get this lady checked in and away from my desk, so I don't care. So I tell her that I can do that for her, and I make the necessary adjustments. Now, I'm more about procuring the room and tax more than the security deposit, so I run the authorization for the former first, and guess what happens? If you guessed it, her card declines. Her face went the brightest shade of red I had ever seen, like I did not think it was possible for someone to go this red. I thought she was going to go full anger from inside out. There is money on my card, tell me why it's declining. Here, look. She then proceeds to shove her phone in my face with her bank card on it. And there was indeed money on her card, but I have no idea why her card is declining, so I repeat myself and tell her that I can't see why her card declines. After going back and forth with her about this, she asks me to waive our deposit. Keep in mind, I haven't even authorized the first deposit yet, just the room and tax, so I tell her, Ma'am, I have no way to waive the security deposit, and this was also for the room and tax, not the deposit. Well, WTF, I used this card the last time I stayed here. Just waive the fees and give me my room. I can't do that, ma'am. Well, I'm a precious metal member, and I cannot believe that this is how I am being treated. I demand to be treated better. Now, I have been working in the customer service industry for nearly a decade, and have seen every honors program under the sun. I legit do not care. So I apologize to the guest for how she feels she is being treated, yada yada yada, but she is hearing none of it. You know what? Just cancel my reservation. I'll stay somewhere else. Of course, ma'am. I say monotone while I am jumping for joy inside that this woman is leaving. Little does she realize that if her card declined here, it's gonna decline wherever she goes. So that's my story. Thanks for taking the time to listen. 3. So I was working night audit at a hotel in the Midwest. 10 p.m. to 9 a.m. Kind of a meh hotel that was attracted to a lot of nefarious characters, but was located right along the highway, so you would get truckers, oil field guys, families, etc., normal people. But then sprinkling your drug addicts and less desirables at the same time. So, about 2 a.m. I get a phone call at the front desk from a gentleman who sounds a little intoxicated with a heavy accent, redneck. He's drunk but still pretty coherent. He explains to me that his wife is being ridiculous and wants me to come down to the room and tell her to act right, or she can't stay there no more. A little taken aback, I explain to him that, sir, I can't tell another adult to act right. That's a grown woman. Now, if you want me to call the police and have her removed from your room, since it's in your name, then we can definitely go that route. No, I don't want that. I just need you to come down here and scare her a little bit so she'll act right. Sir, I can't do that. Oh, come on, she's German. Like she's from Germany? She don't know how stuff is here in America. So she'll scare easy. Just put a little fire in her and she'll get scared, behave. Okay, there's no way I'm doing that, sir. Well, this is bull crap.
This is your job.
It's your wife. So the guy gets mad and hangs up. This goes back and forth a couple times with him calling the front desk. Eventually, I hear the doorbell ding, and the guy steps into the lobby. Sure enough, Redneck with a beer in hand is at the front desk asking me to
call me correct, right?
FML. I agree to have a word with her just so I can shut him up. We get down to the room, he opens the door to what I can only explain as the most pissed-off German lady I have ever seen. Tall, blonde, athletic, at least 6 feet, and mad as hell. She towered over this guy. Side note, when people are really pissed or emotional, be it anger, sex, grief, or whatever, they often resort to their native language without realizing it. She is screaming in German, and he's smiling, thinking I'm here to say, I don't understand you, please STFU and act right, and then be on my way. Plot twist, I speak German. She is trying her best to speak English, but when I ask her what's wrong in German, her eyes light up, and the guy's face just drops. He's definitely reevaluating the situation. She explains to me that he's drunk and being a dick, and just kinda being controlling. It's her, him, and their daughter. I ask her why she doesn't just leave. She says it's normal, but as long as he's drunk, they're inevitably going to keep arguing. At this point, he's trying to chime in every third word, so we switch to German, only to be interrupted by a very sloppy scream of, English! Speak English! This goes on for a couple minutes, eventually bubbling over, her and him just getting into a screaming match. I am desperately losing control of the situation. Finally, I just yell, Stop! This is fucking ridiculous, you're grown adults! Now for the love of God, just act like it! Her argument is that he's drunk, and his argument is that she's German. I guess that's code for bitch? So, finally just say, well, why don't you get your own room for the night, if he's such a dick? Now the waterworks come out.
Oh, you stole my purse and I have no money. If you lady, you can check the daggone truck. I know you have my scheiße.
He throws her the keys to the truck.
Go check.
Okay, hold the phone. What's actually happening here? This is bananas. So she says, the only card I have is the one to our joint bank account. Can I use that? Does it have your name on it? Yes! Then yes, that will be fine.
Fuck that there's my money. She's stealing all my money.
Sir, if it has both your names on it, then there's literally nothing I can do. I have to accept it. By this point, she's beaming. She thinks she's won. This entire time, I think the guy's a drunk asshole, but really, she's just psychotic. Yes, he's drunk, but he's pretty coherent, and I honestly believe him. So ask the kid what's up. The kid explains they fight all the time, and she's a psycho, and he drinks to escape it. If I believe anybody, I believe the kid. So, finally he gives up and says whatever. She rushes out of the room to the lobby to pay for a separate room. As I'm making her reservation, all by hand by the way, super low-tech hotel, she's telling me all the things wrong with her husband and how it was a mistake to come to America, blah blah blah. I go to run her card and it immediately declines. She's like, WTF, I have plenty of money. Yeah, okay, sure you do. No, look. She shows her account balance on her phone, and they have well over 100K in checking alone. Oh, well, then there should be no reason for your card to decline. Mind you, the process of getting her to the lobby and making the reservation and all this other crap has taken at least 45 minutes. Cue Redneck. Guy walks in holding his phone while whistling a tune.
Let me guess. Card didn't work, did it? Plenty of money though, huh? Almost like someone shut your card off.
This motherfucker went on his bank app and remotely shut her card off. She freaking loses it. Goes bat crap crazy on the guy and starts to wreck my lobby. At this point, I've absolutely had enough, so I scream, enough, you are going to stop drinking, and you, the wife, are going to act right. Cut this shit, are we clear? Both heads low, and both in agreement then say yes. She heads back to the room. He hangs back for a sec, looks me in the eye and says,
Thanks, man. That's all you had to do in the first place.
Oh my god, this Murphy just Jedi mind tricked me. They both go back to the room and I don't hear another peep out of them. Moral of the story, if a redneck asks you to come down and ask his German wife to act right, just freaking do it. 4. Many years ago in the 90s, I was a chief night auditor at a busy 5-star DT hotel. We had a somewhat rudimentary, by today's standards, hotel information system, cleverly called HIS. and our outlet's POS was Romanco. Part of my nightly duties was to run a batch of reports from the Romanco brain in the computer room. The mothership was called Cremanco, and had a very convoluted interface that took me some months to master. Once I finally figured out how to run the Cremanco, I became kind of the resident guru, as no one else ever went further than just running the basic reports. One particularly slow night, I was messing around in the reports menu, and I found of the 30+ available reports, we were only printing one. We would take 2 or 3 numbers from the report for each of the hotel bars and restaurants plus room service, and enter them into a master night audit report in HIS. I started printing some of the other reports, one each shift, just for fun. One night fiddling around with this almost bit me in the ass because the report took so long to compile. I wasn't sure it was going to finish in time for the cafe to open at 5:30, and the POS couldn't be used until it was done. It did, but only by 10 minutes. Crisis narrowly averted. The next night, I ran a report called the Check Reprint Report. Most of the reports I had previously run for fun were just full of meaningless data and would go right into the garbage. But this report was only 1 page long. I took it back to my desk in the front office and started to read it, not fully understanding what it was at the time. The front desk motion sensor advised me of an approaching guest. I put the report in my inbox and I got busy with morning duties. Then my shift was over and I was off for 2 days. I thought about the report during my days off. There was something I couldn't put my finger on, but it bothered me. When I went back to work after days off, I went a little early, so I could look at the report before my shift. The report showed 7 IDs, no names. Under each one was 2 check-in numbers and the times they were printed. One of the keys had about 20 reprints, and 1 check number, the others a couple each. That night I printed the check print report for the past month. NA was busy that night, so no investigation then. But my curiosity piqued. I stayed after my shift and examined each report. The pattern was the same. There were a total of about 12 unique Romanco key numbers that had a few reprints each day, but only one number always had many. I went up to the cafe to speak to the restaurant manager and asked him why a check would be reprinted so many times. He did not know why. Then we tried to determine who used that key ID. I suggested he conduct an audit of all the keys in the possession of the servers. It took a week, but we eventually were able to put a name to each Romanco ID. The key with the most reprints was a long-time employee. She had been a server at the cafe for over 20 years and was highly respected. We started conducting interviews with each of the servers, starting with her. When asked why she reprinted the same check so many times, she had no answer, as did none of the other employees we spoke to. Even more miraculously, the reprinting behavior also stopped that day. We made the reprint order part of the daily reports, and there was literally no check reprinted for about 6 weeks. Then one day there was 1, the next day 3, the day after that 10. Within no time the activity was back up to the previous levels. I was duty manager one weekend and was having breakfast in the cafe Saturday morning, reading the paper and watching the servers when it hit me. I knew what was going on. I wasn't on NA when I was on the DM, but I went to my office and pulled all the reprint reports for the month before the activity dropped off. The times of the reprints were mostly during the 3 meal rushes of the day, but most checks were printed between 11:30 and 1400. The cafe had changed to a buffet style about 2 years ago. You could still order from the menu, but we would lay out an extravagant buffet that also featured hot items. At $7.95 for breakfast, $13.95 for lunch, and $22.95 for dinner. It wasn't cheap, but it offered tremendous variety. It was very popular, especially for the lunch crowd, as it was quick and easy. The hotel was connected by pedways to 3 high-rise office buildings, so the lunch rush was substantial. The hotel had taken this approach as the cafe often struggled to be profitable, despite always being busy. I knew from the staff scuttlebutt the servers didn't like it though, as it cut into their tips. Customers were less likely to tip when they did all the work of getting their meal. I had figured out the scam. A server would put a check down for a table where everyone had, say, the lunch buffet. If they paid by credit card, that check would be closed when the card was settled against it. If the customers paid cash, which quite a few did back in those days before Interlac and Apple Pay, then they would take the check as their receipt. But the server would reprint the check for the next customer, and as they did not have to settle the check number, the cash would go into their pocket, tax and all. The server would need to settle the check at the end of their shift. but they could easily have 30 or 40 tables during a shift and only settle 25 checks. We re-interviewed all of the servers with our theory, starting with the more junior employees first this time. And it only took 2 interviews for the server to crack. She said she had been taught this during her training, and that everybody did it. We eventually interviewed every server, and everyone except the most senior one confessed. They all pointed to her as the ringleader of sorts, or at least the pioneer of the technique. A couple of servers said they were glad they were caught. They suffered tremendous guilt, but couldn't stop themselves. Servers would typically work a shift that got covered 2 meal periods, and, if that was lunch and dinner, they could often supplement their wage and tips with $100 or $200 in cash reprints. Serious coin in those days. A few servers quit, a few were fired. A couple were reprimanded and agreed to repay a portion by allowing the hotel to garnish their wages for a year for an agreed-upon amount. That was handled by HR, so I was not privy to the amount. The senior server steadfastly stuck to her guns, saying she was innocent. I was able to figure out how to print a reprint report for only her key, and I did so for as far back as the records went, about 18 months. As far as we could calculate, she was pocketing an extra $250 to $400 a day, more on special occasions or during Christmas when the buffet prices temporarily increased. She was terminated and unbelievably tried to file a wrongful dismissal suit. When we and our corporate attorney met with her lawyer and presented an inch-thick pile of reprint reports plus a spreadsheet I created showing her theft was in excess of $100,000 over 18 months, the attorney got up and left, saying we'd hear from them soon. We never heard from her again. I left the hotel myself a few months later and never heard if they followed up with the charges. We also figured out how to make the reprint function require a supervisor override. All that because of a bored night auditor. 5. My hotel is not doing so great. We were expecting a lot of people to travel for spring break. Instead, we got a whole lot of cancellations instead. Not to mention the original owner sold the property to 2 of his brothers who had hired a management company to oversee the transition. And it looks like they mismanaged a few things. For one thing, it looks like they put off paying a whole lot of bills as best they could to make it seem like the hotel was making more money than it was. So when the new owner came in, he was sitting on thousands, possibly tens of thousands of unpaid invoices. That combined with all the cancellations has left us with single-digit room arrivals per day. So the owner wants us to do heads in beds. Normally we are allowed to be a bit discriminating. If we think someone is sketchy or they might cause problems, we can turn them away. Now people are being more lenient and it's already biting me in the ass. So yesterday, someone arrives in and asks how much for a room. I tell him what type and he says he needs to talk to his girlfriend. They then sit in the parking lot for a good 40 minutes before coming back in. Seems sketchy but not necessarily damning. Then their friend walks up to them from off the street, and a few minutes later they come in for the room. The woman's card doesn't have a chip. Normally I wouldn't let them check with that, but it has her name matching her ID. I thought, hey, if the swiper on the chip reader authorizes it, it should be good. Right? Yeah, I don't know. It took way longer to authorize it than normal, but it did double check to make sure the authorization was in the system. It was, so I let them in. This morning, I come in and the night auditor tells me that the guest in room A said he found fleas in the room and was getting bitten all night, so the night auditor moved him to room B. He calls down again saying his room has fleas too. He was offered to move again, but I guess decided against it. I've worked here for over 6 years. We're not a pet-friendly property. We've never had fleas. Neither of these rooms had guests in them for days. I don't see how they could have gotten there. Unless, of course, he brought them in, but of course, we can't accuse someone of that. Turns out it didn't come to that, though. I told him I would have my head of housekeeping inspect the rooms. I phoned her and asked her to come in early because at this point, he was phoning down to the desk every 10 minutes. She comes in, doesn't find anything in room A, goes to room B, and doesn't find anything. She and the driver, I guess they went together, said he kept trying to show them all these bites he had, but he didn't seem to have any. She also brought down this little black speck he said was a flea. It just looked like a black speck. No discernible legs or anything and wasn't moving. I could kind of see how it might look like a flea, but it wasn't moving at all. So at this point, he goes into the classic song and dance of how he used to work for a hotel, he knows we're in cahoots and that we're lying. Additionally, he accused me of calling him a liar, and I've long since learned never to do that. I told him I can't account for why he felt like he'd been ravished by fleas. I only know the hotel isn't responsible for it. Multiple times he tries to get me to say I'm calling him a liar, but I don't. Next interesting bit. What I didn't know was that when the head of housekeeping looked in room A, she found that the fire alarm had been taken off the ceiling, batteries taken out and towels shoved under all the doors, and a condom under the bed. Next time he called down, I brought that up to him and he denied, said the room was like that when he came in. Next, he's calling corporate. I already sent them a form explaining what happened ahead of time. He's gonna take pictures and call all these people blah blah blah. I told him if he had pictures of the fleas, then this would all be settled. Please, take the pictures. Then moved away from that and said he's going to call his wife, who's a lawyer. That is why I mentioned the condom. I'm sure this is more bullshit, but I figured his wife would be very interested to find out we found a condom in a hotel room he was staying in without her. Keeping that ammunition in my back pocket for now. His next phone call down, he's back to calling corporate, so I offer to give him corporate's number, which he takes. After some more back and forth with the same, I tell him I'm losing patience with this, and I'm going to have to let him go. Here is where he accuses me of racial discrimination. Not once has race come into it. This always tells me they know they're doing something shady. Penultimately, he brings a towel down with a few more little specks. Don't look like fleas, none of them are moving. Head of housekeeping and I look at them. Again, don't look like fleas. So he says he's calling 911. Housekeeper says go ahead. He goes back to his room and the switchboard is showing like 3 911 calls coming from the room. I assume they told him this wasn't a police emergency. Maybe they told him to call the non-emergency number, but I don't know what they'd do. Lastly, he left his phone in his room because of course he did. Something always has to happen to drag this sort of shit on forever. I call the first room and say he can pick up his phone, but he has to leave. Luckily, he came down for the phone, mumbled some more nonsense, and left without further incident. Of course, that other couple is still here. I decided not to kick them out since they didn't cause any trouble, but I'm sure there's going to be more tomorrow. I always go into this thinking it's a short, simple little story, but this might be the longest thing I've written since college. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Coahw, number 35. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Where are we now? This should be Tuesday. It's April 1st tomorrow, right? Brace yourselves for that. I am working on a little bonus video for later in the week. Don't know what day. This is more of a pet project of mine. Not very long. It's just, say about 10, 11 minutes, depending what else I add to it. It was a shaky little thing I've been working on for a few months now. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.